بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So we're still on the topic of Al-Qadar, and in the previous lesson we looked at 3 or 4 of the major reasons which led these people to go astray on the topic of Al-Qadar. And just as a reminder and as a recap, the first of them and the greatest of them is that the Qadariyyah, in fact, we have the Qadariyyah who denied Al-Qadar and the Jabariyyah who exaggerated in Al-Qadar. And so they fell. So these 3 or 4 reasons which led them to fall into error is something common between the groups of the Qadariyyah. So the first of them we mentioned is that they analogized between the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the actions of the servants. And so whatever they saw to be praiseworthy or blameworthy in the actions of the servants, then they analogized likewise for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so therefore they entered the notions of justice and injustice, al-adl wal-dhulm. So when they saw al-adl wal-dhulm according to what they saw in the creation, then they judged Allah's actions to be likewise. So they also labeled dhulm, like for example, if someone became a disbeliever, this would be considered to be dhulm as it relates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? To force someone to become a disbeliever, or to bring about some harm or loss or whatever else, this would be dhulm, because clearly this is the case in the creation. So then they said, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala misguides someone or things of this nature, then this too would be dhulm. This therefore would be dhulm as well. And on that basis they denied that Allah is the one who actually guides or misguides, or the one who creates the actions of the servants. Right? So they made analogies between what is dhulm and adl in the actions of the servants, and then treated Allah's actions with the same principle, and therefore denied things for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon their understanding of what would be dhulm and oppression. That was the first major thing that we mentioned. The second major thing that we mentioned is that they failed to distinguish between the irada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which relates to the Sharia, the irada meaning that which Allah wants from His servants and which He is pleased with and loves, and between the other irada, which is the irada kawniyya, which is the mashi'a of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that by which Allah brings everything into existence, whether He likes it or He doesn't like it, whether He's pleased with it or He's not pleased with it. This is the mashi'a or the irada kawniyya. Those two are the same. As for the irada shar'iyya, that is what Allah wants, which He loves and is pleased with, but which may or may not occur. It may or it may not occur. And the third, so they did not distinguish between these 2 types of irada. They lumped everything together into one whole thing, and so they treated everything to be together. The third major principle that led them to misguidance is that they began to they began to enter into labeling things as being hasan, which is good, and qabih, which is repugnant, by way of the intellect, by way of reason. And so just like reason can tell us in the life of this world that certain actions are repugnant and evil, or good on the other hand, even without revelation, because some things we can know even without revelation. Like fornication, for example, is qabih, and reason and fitrah knows that, can know that. And likewise stealing is qabih, it is repugnant, and reason can know that. And likewise lying and whatever else. But there are some things that we cannot know except by way of revelation. And this is what the correct view is of Ahlul Sunnah regarding what role does the intellect play. That yes, in some things it can recognize that it is evil or repugnant, and in other things it needs revelation. But what these people did is that they employed this principle in relation to the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So reason now can be a judge as to whether an action is qabih or hasan as it relates to Allah, and built upon that they would either deny actions for Allah or affirm actions for Allah. Right? So to misguide someone it's repugnant. So therefore this is not something that Allah does. Right? So again, now reason has entered. Now they brought reason into the realm of judging what can and cannot be an action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because they've employed the reason in judging whether something is hasan or qabih. And so we said that this, who put you in the position to be judging and deciding, whether what Allah does is hasan or qabih? Who put you in that position? Allah says, لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. It's an ayah in the Quran that He will not be asked about what He does, but they will be asked. That was the third major reason, employing intellect in what is hasan and qabih. And the fourth thing was really that they began to speculate about the actions of Allah, and they did not submit to the texts in the Sharia, and so this led them to being abandoned and falling into oppression and being prevented, and all of the other things that lead on from abandoning the book and the Sunnah. So this was really the main thing that we covered in the previous lesson. And so today we also made a mention in the previous lesson of some terms that were very important to understand, which is at-ta'leel wal-hikmah. At-ta'leel wal-hikmah. At-ta'leel means that what is the justification or the reason behind an action. And al-hikmah is what is the goal and objective and the wisdom behind an action. And the implication of these people entering into these false ideas, so when they entered into these false ideas, there were certain implications or conclusions that they were led to. And so from the conclusions that the Jabariyyah were led to is that they said that there's no hikmah behind Allah's actions. All of Allah's actions are just neutral. So Allah never does anything for anything. Right? Because they claim that this would be a deficiency for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, and they denied at-ta'leel and al-hikmah. That there is no wisdom behind Allah's actions. Because Allah does not do something for something. Right? Because according to them, this would mean that Allah is in need. Allah would be in need of something. This is batil, this is false. This is batil, it is false. And the proof for this we'll mention a bit later on. And we will elaborate upon this a bit later, inshallah ta'ala, as to why they held this view. But those two words are quite crucial for you to understand, at-ta'leel wal-hikmah. And so, to commence today's lesson then, we will be looking at the groups of the Qadariyyah. And so basically, broadly speaking, those who opposed Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, they are of two groups. The first of them, as you know, are the Qadariyyah, and the second of them are Jabariyyah. So when we speak of those who went to straighten al-Qadar, then we straightway divide them into two broad groups. First are the Qadariyyah, and they are the ones who denied al-Qadar. They denied al-Qadar. And either they denied all four levels of al-Qadar, or they only denied some of the levels of al-Qadar. And we will look at each of those in a bit more detail. So that's the Qadariyyah. And the Jabariyyah are those who claim that man is compelled and he has no choice. A man has no choice and he is compelled to do what he does. Right? That's in a nutshell the two groups. As for the first group, the Qadariyyah, then the Qadariyyah, they are of two groups in turn. And the first of them are the extremists. The extremists. And they are the ones whom, as we said before, they denied Allah's knowledge. They denied Allah has knowledge, prior knowledge of events, and they claimed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not know anything until after it occurs. So He only becomes aware and He only knows of an action of a servant until after it occurs. And that basically the affairs are just random and things just happen randomly and there's no prior determination, and Allah only knows the affairs once they occur. And this was the belief of the very first Qadariyyah, as we mentioned previously, that those who appeared in the time of Abdullah bin Umar radiyallahu anhu, and they came from Iraq, they were in Iraq, and these people had been mixing with the Christians and other than them, and these shubuhat came to them from those directions, and so they began to deny Qadar in its entirety, as a whole, all of the four levels of Al-Qadar: the ilm, the kitaba, and the irada, or the mashia, and the khalq. Everything. They denied everything. And these were denied, or these were declared to be disbelievers. Anyone who denies the prior knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is kufr. This is disbelief. So the Salaf declared them to be disbelievers. The Sahaba declared them to be disbelievers, like Ibn Umar and Ibn Abbas and others. And now this group, as we said, that these people are no longer present today as a group. And just because we say that a particular group isn't present does not mean that there are not found individuals who are upon this belief. Like, for example, one group from the 3rd century called the Karramiyya. The Karramiyya were Hanafis, and they basically were a group from Ahlul Kalam, and they claimed that Iman is just to say the Shahada, and that's it, that makes you a believer in reality, even though you might be a hypocrite inside. And they had some other beliefs. Now the Karramiyya don't exist today, which, who can be readily identified, but that doesn't mean that there are not to be found people in certain places and locations, be they individuals or be they in small groups, who might still be carrying this particular belief. And so the prime example of this, of the Qadariyyah that we are speaking of now, the extremist amongst the Qadariyyah, which I mentioned in a previous lesson, is this man called Shabir Ali. Shabir Ali, who is a Canadian, who debates with Christians and other than them. This man is a Qadari upon what these people were upon. And so we discussed that in a previous lesson. But the point that we're making here is that just because a group is said to non-exist and to be gone and is not formally known today, does not mean that there will not be individuals who will have those same shubuhat and will be speaking with those shubuhat, which shows why it is crucial for us to understand and know the correct and sound aqidah in all its detail. So this was the first group. The second group of the Qadariyyah are those who took the bid'ah of the original Qadariyyah, but they weren't as extreme. And so this is carried by the Mu'tazila, and likewise the Shia in general, because the Shia, they were affected by the creed of the Mu'tazila. They were affected by the Mu'tazila. That's why amongst the Shia you will find i'tizal, you will find the same ideas and beliefs of the Mu'tazila, of denial of Allah's attributes and things of that nature. And likewise the Zaydiyya, who are a group of the Shia, who are like a light type of Shiism, moderate type of Shiism. They're not extreme, and so they're also upon some of the ideas of the Qadariyyah. And so they are the ones who carried this bid'ah of the Qadariyyah. However, they do not deny all of the levels of Al-Qadar. So they affirmed Al-Ilm, they affirmed Al-Kitaba, but they denied the Mashi'a of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They didn't deny it absolutely, but they said that the Mashi'a of Allah is not something that encompasses everything. So let's get this right. They did not deny that Allah has Mashi'a. They just denied the generality, or the fact that Allah's Mashi'a encompasses every single thing. That's what they denied. And likewise Allah's khalq, Allah's creative power and qudra and ability. They do not deny that Allah has creative power and ability and that He creates and so on and so forth, but they denied the generality and the inclusiveness of it. Right? So this is what they denied. And so they said, yes, Allah has a mashi'a, but it is not general. It does not apply to the actions of the servants. Yes, Allah creates things. Of course He creates things. But His creation, His act of creating does not apply to the actions of the servants. He doesn't create the actions of the servants. Right? So this is what they meant. And this is what they said. And again, try to connect everything to what we're discussing, because why were they saying this? Why were they saying that Allah does not have a overall mashi'a? Allah does not have an overall creative power and ability? Because they did not want to ascribe to Allah that He creates kufr. That he brings about kufr in the actions of His servants. That He brings about dhulm, one person killing another person. They wanted to free Allah from having what they saw to be dhulm ascribed to Him. Because again, they're making qiyas, as we said, qiyas of Allah's actions with those of the creation. They're making intellect to decide what is hasan and qabih. And they're not distinguishing between irada shar'iyya and irada kawniyya. Because of all these things, they're saying here that we deny Allah's mashi'a and khalq is applicable to everything in the creation, including the actions of the servants. Because now they see this to be dhulm. Right? But again, this is from their jahl. So basically this is what they were saying, the Mu'tazila, the Shia and the Zaydiyah in general. So they took on this bid'ah, but it wasn't as severe as the bid'ah of the first Qadariyyah, who denied everything. As for the Jabariyyah, so now we've gone from one side, we're now moving to the other side, the Jabariyyah who exaggerated in Al-Qadar. So they said that a man is compelled in every single thing. He's forced and compelled in everything. He's just like when you have, for example, a strip of leather or some, cloth or something that's tied onto a branch of a tree and it just gets swayed with the wind and moved and tossed and, with the wind. Or it's like a boat on the ocean and the boat doesn't move its own accord. It's basically the waves which toss it from direction to direction, which make it go in the direction that it's going. It doesn't have any choice. So likewise is the servant. The servant is exactly the same. He does not have any choice, and he is someone, basically, it's not that he does actions, but actions are performed upon him. So he's not actually now choosing to do actions. Rather, actions are performed upon him. So in other words, he now simply becomes a repository. He's just like something in which things are done. Not by his own accord, but by something else, by someone else, which here is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So they say, right, so this was one thing that they said. And then built upon this, now again, look, understand the reasoning of these people. Understand what's happening in their minds. So when they said this, when they said that man does not have any choice and he's forced, they then were led to another thing, which is to say that there's no ta'leel, there's no reason or justification in Allah's actions. Why? Because if you say that Allah is forcing everyone to do what they are doing, Allah is forcing the kufr of a kafir, the shirk of a mushrik, the ma'siyah of an asi, of someone who is disobedient. And likewise, the obedience of an obedient person, and the iman of a mu'min, and the Islam of a Muslim, and so on and so forth. So now, they said that there is no ta'leel, there's no reason or justification or wisdom behind Allah's actions. Everything is neutral to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whether He forces someone to disbelief, or whether He forces someone to iman, those actions are just pure, they're neutral. They're just neutral. There isn't any wisdom or ta'leel or any way that Allah's actions can be spoken of in that manner. It is pure neutrality. And reason is because the people who are doing the actions are doing them without their choice. There's no choice involved in anything. So therefore everything becomes just neutral. These are just Allah's actions, and there isn't any, as we said, any hikmah or ta'leel behind what Allah is doing. So this belief was the one that was spoken of by Jahm bin Safwan, the founder and the leader of the Jahmiyyah. He was the one who originated or who spoke of this particular belief, and it is also found amongst the extremist Sufis. Many of these extremist Sufis, they are upon this particular belief, even though they won't explicitly state it, they conceal it, and it's hidden behind many layers of philosophy and terminology, but they're upon this particular belief. So this is the first group of the Jabariyyah. The first group of the Jabariyyah. They are the extremists, and as we said, they say everyone is forced to do what they do. Now the second group of the Jabariyyah, so just like we had the Qadariyyah in the 1st century, and their belief was inherited by the Mu'tazila in the 2nd century, but it wasn't as extreme, right? Likewise, the Jabariyyah in the 2nd century, founded by which was innovated by Jahm bin Safwan, there came people afterwards in the 3rd and 4th centuries, or the 4th century, who inherited that belief from those people, and they are the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. The Ash'aris and the Maturidis. And so what they tried to do, they also exaggerated in the Mashi'a of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah's the khalq, Allah's creation. But what they try to do now, is that they try to they held on to these ideas of the Jabariyyah, but then they try to reconcile and try to make it look as if they're not really agreeing with the Jabariyyah, right? So they try to make their opinion appear as, well, it's not like what the Jabariyyah are upon. And to do this, they brought about some terms and some labels in order to make it appear other than what it really is. And so one of those terms and labels that they brought is that they said that a man, that he earns his deeds, and they call it kasb. They earn it kasb. They call it al-kasb. Al-kasb means like an earning. And what they were trying really to do is to combine between the belief that they were sticking to, that Allah, forces everyone to do what they do, and at the same time make it appear that a man has a choice. Right? So now they're trying to merge these two together. How do we bring these two together? Right? And they try to do it in a way that is other than what is in the book and the Sunnah, which we shall explain a bit later on. So they came and they invented this word. And this is the way of these people in everything, the Ahlul Kalam. They will invent a word, and then they will give that word a meaning other than the meaning that is known for it in the book and the Sunnah. Right? And so therefore they will try to make their view appear to be as if it is in agreement with the Quran and the Sunnah. Not in terms of the meaning, but just because of the wording that is used. Right? This is in everything what they do. They use the word at-tawheed. What do you mean by tawheed? What we mean by tawheed is to affirm Allah's names and His attributes, and to affirm that none has the right to be worshipped except Him alone, and that He is unique in His actions. But what do they mean? What do the other groups mean by tawheed? Tawheed, to the philosophers, Allah is just an abstract notion, just an idea of oneness in the mind. No attributes, no names. That's tawheed now to them. They use the same name, same label, but the meaning is something totally different. To the Mu'tazila, tawheed is to deny Allah's attributes. To the Sufiya, tawheed is that the whole of the universe is one single entity. And shirk is to claim that the creation and the created are separate, because now you've made them into two, and this is shirk. Look at this twisted understanding of what is tawheed. Tawheed, to the Jabariyyah, who we are speaking now, is to claim that there is an actor and a doer besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So tawheed to the Jabariyyah is that the only one acting, it's only Allah who is acting, and to whom actions can be ascribed. Why? Because they are saying that Allah is forcing everyone to do their actions. So Allah is the fa'il. Allah is the actual doer of every single action. Right? So now tawheed to them is to affirm that for Allah. And if you said, yes, man, he acts And Allah also acts, you've now committed shirk. Because now you've affirmed two doers and two agents who are acting. So look at, so what we get, what the point that we're making here is that what these people do is that they will take a label and a term which has an origin in the Sharia, like at-tawheed, for example. The same thing with iman. Iman, what is iman to the murjiya? Iman is ma'rifah only in the heart to some of them, tasdeeq only in the heart to others, speech of the tongue only to others. Right, so they will take a label in the Sharia and then give it a meaning other than what's in the Sharia. So the same thing here with al-kasb. Al-kasb. Kasb. This word is used in the Quran. This word is used in the Quran. And we see that we see this word is used in the Quran, and the word laha ma kasabat wa alayha maktasabat. That to a soul is whatever it earns. And the word is used in the Quran. So what they did basically is to make it look and appear as if man has a choice. They used this label and said, a man earns his actions. The man, he earns his actions. And that whereas inwardly he is forced, outwardly it appears that he has a choice. So they just use this term, and really it's like, to understand what they're really getting at, the best way, to get the concept into your mind, it can be quite subtle, but the best way maybe to explain it is it's as if, let's say for example, that you have a robot, for example, and you have a remote control, and you press buttons, and so clearly you are performing actions upon that thing, and as a credit, you give it a credit every time it does something. So now you give it a credit. If it does a certain thing, you give it a credit. Right? So now it's earning points. It's earning something. It's earning deeds. Not that it itself had a choice in doing the deeds, but because it was the entity in which those deeds were done. The deeds were performed on that entity, then that entity is now earned. You've earned a point, for example, or you've earned a good deed, for example. Right? So this is basically what they are really saying, what they really mean by kasb. Kasb. Right? So it's like the illusion of choice. There is no choice in reality, but you are earning something because you are the thing, you are the entity in which actions are being done. Alright? So now you have to get that in your mind. So in other words, every single human, every single person is just simply a repository. We are just entities and things in which Allah chooses to do His actions. So, to some, they will be led to disbelief, others will be, led to sin, others will do righteous deeds, whatever else. And all of these actions are just totally neutral as it relates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He chooses to do whatever He pleases. And He will give a credit to a certain person if it's a certain deed that Allah performs through that entity, or it's another type of maybe something negative if it's another type of deed that Allah performs through that entity. Right? So we are just earning not from our own choice, but rather it is something that Allah bestows upon us. So they use this word kasb, and that's what they actually meant. And they try to reconcile between what the Jabariyyah were upon, like Jahm bin Safwan, and between what Ahlul Sunnah are upon, who clearly affirm a clear choice and clear, ability to choose, for mankind. And they try to bring these two together and try to, package it together under the label of al-kasb. And as you can see, when you think about this in reality, they haven't escaped anything. They haven't affirmed a will and a choice for mankind, and they haven't escaped from the saying of Jahm bin Safwan. Right? Because, this label, this al-kasb and whatever is intended by it, it doesn't change the fact that a man is still forced to do whatever he is doing. So they never escaped it. So anyway, this is the second group of the Jabariyyah. We have the Jabariyyah, the extremists. Just like the Qadariyyah, we have extremists. And then we have those who came after, who try to be, pretend to be moderate, who are the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. And that is what they are upon. And so one of the consequences from this, you will now understand some of the positions of the Ash'aris, because when you hold this particular view, when you hold this viewpoint, and you claim that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He is forcing people to do their actions, and you deny that a man has been given certain faculties by which a man chooses actions, right? They held this view with respect to man's actions. This now has implications on other things, right? So now think about this bit carefully. What we say is Allah has given man faculties. So we have irad, we have will, and we have qudra, we have power and ability to effect certain things with our limbs, right? This is the means. So this is the means. Allah has given us these means by which a man can act, right? So now there's an intermediary thing. Allah has put qualities in man which lead to action, right? But what those people are saying is because they've denied that man has any truly independent irada or truly independent action, man is forced to do what he is doing, then really the doer must be Allah Himself. Allah is the doer. It is only Allah who is the doer of every single action. As we've already said before, this is tawheed to them. Right. Now, because they held onto this view, as it relates to man's actions, this now has an implication on every single thing else. Right? Now you'll see where we're going with this. To give an example, if I drink a glass of water, right, to us, as Ahlul Sunnah, because we believe Allah has put faculties and inherent strengths and things within entities. So for example, in man, He's put irada, He's put qudra, so we are able to act. Now we do actions, right? Likewise in water, He has put some inherent qualities. Those inherent qualities are, like for example, it quenches your thirst, right? Likewise in fire, Allah has put inherent qualities in fire. And those inherent qualities are that it burns. And likewise, Allah has put inherent qualities in, let's say, certain gases, for example, like carbon dioxide or oxygen. Oxygen for humans and carbon dioxide for plants, for example. And through that, there are certain effects which are. So what we're getting at here, we see that Allah creates something for something. Right? Allah does something for something. So we are now, what are we affirming? We are affirming that there are ways and means in the creation, the asbab. There are ways and means. So we believe in the ways and means, right? There are ways and means that Allah has put in the creation. What this means in simple terms is that water is a means for quenching the thirst. Water is a means of plants growing from the soil. And the same applies to every single thing else in the creation, right? There are asbab, there are millions and billions and trillions of asbab that we don't even know. And all of this is subject to research and so on and so forth. And this is what really the kuffar in the sciences, that's what they're investigating, that's what they're discovering. They're simply discovering the asbab that Allah has put in the creation. So we affirm the asbab. We affirm the asbab. So we affirm, just like when it comes to man's actions, that Allah put qudra and irada as mechanisms in an individual, and through those mechanisms a man acts, right? Likewise, the same principle in the rest of the creation. So, this is how we explain how are we able to make use of this technology like a microphone, and what's happening behind the scenes. There are asbab, there are ways and means behind all of this, which Allah has put in His creation that allow these effects to be manifested. So what these people now, because these people said what they said about man's actions, so they denied a man has any qudra or irada, you now have to be consistent. You have to be consistent now. You have to be consistent and apply it to everything else in the creation. Otherwise, they would fall into a contradiction. Right? So therefore, they said, for example, when a man drinks water, it wasn't a water that quenched his thirst. Rather, it is from Allah's habit that when the drinking of water occurs, Allah creates the quenching there and then. right? Not that the water has any inherent qualities or strengths which led to the quenching of the thirst. So in other words, what they are doing, they are denying the asbab. They are denying what we call causality. This is what the word is in English, causality. Causality simply means that things have inherent strengths, things have inherent qualities, and so they are denying that anything in the creation has any inherent strength or quality. Rather, and again, this to them is a matter of tawheed. Right? This to them is a matter of tawheed. Right? And what they mean, for example, to give some more examples, if I have a stick in my hand and I hit a stone and the stone breaks, then according to them, it wasn't the force and the speed of the stick, and it wasn't the stone's susceptibility to break, right? It was simply that these things are just simply coincidental. It is Allah that creates the breaking of the stone when the two things just simply happen to meet together, right? So what they're denying here now, they're denying the asbab in the creation. We know that there is momentum, there is force, there is, all of these things, we know that they exist because Allah has created them and put them in His creation. This is from the great, amazing, power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He can bring about things by way of asbab. That He brings things into being by way of ways and means. That He creates things and He creates ways and means in His creation as well. And so what they're trying to say here then is that what created the breaking was not the speed and momentum of the stick and its, the hardness, and nor was it the stone's susceptibility of being broken, but it was just something that Allah, He made these things coincide, and He just created the breaking of the stone at that particular instance in time. Right? So basically they're denying what we call causality. They're denying causality. So therefore, water does not quench thirst. Water does not cause plants to grow. And the same thing can be said about every other millions and billions and trillions of asbab that exist in the creation. Now, when the non-Muslims look at this, what do they think about? Now, this belief of the Ash'aris, this is the belief of the Ash'aris and Maturidis, this is something that's laughable. And that's why these people, the Ahlul Kalam, the Ash'aris and Maturidis, they are the worst. This creed that they're upon is the worst creed, worst type of creed that makes people flee from Islam and makes Islam appear to be backward and so on and so forth and whatever else, because they are denying causality in the creation, which is ridiculous. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that to give an example, in fact this matter is refuted in the Quran all over the place. Allah says in the Quran, وَأَنزَلَ لَكُم مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً فَأَنبَتْنَا بِهِ, that we sent down from the sky for you water, and we brought about plants by way of it. Bihi. So He made water as a means and a sabab for the bringing about of the plants. And the examples like this in the Quran are many, many in the Quran, where Allah does something by and through something else. What they're trying to deny is trying to say, no, Allah never does something for something. But here we clearly see that Allah, He creates vegetation by what? By way of water. Water is a means by which vegetation is brought about. And, these types of things, as I said, they exist in the millions and trillions in the universe, in Allah's creation. There are asbab that we cannot fathom. And so this then is the implication that these people were led to. They had to be consistent. If you deny man has any choice or will or faculties by which he acts, then you have to deny causality in every single thing else in the creation. And that's actually what they said. That's what they are upon. So what they are saying is that every single thing that is taking place. So now, for example, if we just stop now and think in this room, what's happening in this room, right? We have a voice that is being emanated, right? The voice isn't being created by way of the vocal cords that Allah has created in every human. Rather, it's when those vocal cords are moving, that's just coincidental. Allah is creating my voice at every split second, right? And likewise, the light, we know that the light, how it emits, there's electricity and there's all sorts of things that are taking place, that all those things are coincidental, but Allah is creating the light at every single instance, right? So it's like what they're really trying to say basically is that every single thing in the universe, if you were to break it down into like individual frames, Allah is creating every frame at every single instance of time, right? So let's say the smallest instance of time is 1/trillionth of a second, just for argument's sake, right? Allah is creating the whole universe in every trillionth of a second, creating from nothing, from scratch. It's actually being created at every single. That's what they are saying, and they are saying that because of this belief in that they're denying causality in the universe. Right, they're denying the asbab in the universe. So this is one of the implications and the consequences of what their belief is. It started with what? What did it start with? It started with making qiyas for Allah's actions by actions of man. Using the intellect to decide what is hasan and qabih in Allah's actions. Right? Not distinguishing between irada shar'iyya and irada kawniyya. This then leads them to a false and warped understanding of what is adl, what is justice, and what is injustice. Right? So some of them denied Allah creates the actions of the servants, which He does, were the Qadariyyah. And others said that Allah forces everyone to do His actions. Right? Forces everyone to do His actions. And so when this group said that Allah forces everyone to do His actions, and they denied qudra and irada as faculties within humans, then they have to be consistent, apply it to everything else. Now when you apply this to everything else, that now leads you to deny this idea of causality in the universe. Causality means that there are some things are ways and means that lead to other things. Right? This is, this is something that's clearly established, that electricity is a means through which we have light. Right? And, and this can be applied in billions of ways because the asbab are very many. So then they denied causality in the universe. And so this would mean that what you are envisaging is that nothing exists except Allah and His actions. Is that right? Nothing exists except Allah and His actions. The only one acting is Allah. Allah is creating every single thing at every single instance of time, and no one is acting or doing anything. And there's nothing which is a cause for anything else. Right? And that's why Al-Ghazali, he said, who's one of the Imams, Al-Ghazali, he said, nothing exists except Allah and His actions. Now, see, that's why you have to understand what are these people talking about. Because on the surface of it, when you read that statement and you read, nothing exists except Allah and His actions. Sounds alright. Sounds, what do they really mean? What are they really saying? What are they really saying? And that's why, as I said to you, that these people, when they make these phrases and statements, you have to understand what they are really intending and meaning, where they're really coming from. So when they make that statement, nothing exists except Allah and His actions, all of it is connected to the deviation away from, al-qadar, the correct understanding of al-qadar. And so you see that what they mean by it is something totally different to what we mean by it, as Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Where are we? So we're speaking of al-kasb. That's right, we're speaking of al-kasb. So we're saying that al-kasb then, because Allah is the only one acting. Allah is the only one acting, right? According to the Jabariyyah, only Allah is acting. And so how were they trying to reconcile between what they're sticking to, which is that only Allah acts, and to give the illusion that a man has a choice? And they came with this label and this term of al-kasb, which is that a man, he earns because he is the repository in which actions are being performed, so therefore he clearly deserves the credit or for what he does. And so as we said, that these people, because they said this, because they said this thing, then they made certain things possible upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, it is possible for Allah to put Iblis in paradise. Right? It is possible for Allah to punish Adam alayhi salam in hellfire. Why? Why? Because Allah is the one who is doing all the actions. And so actions are just totally neutral. Right? Iblis going to paradise is something totally neutral to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Adam going to hellfire is something totally neutral to it. There isn't anything, there's no hikmah, there's no ta'leel. So therefore everything is neutral to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you understand that this is something that they had to say? They had to say this because as soon as they deviated one bit, right, which is using qiyas in Allah's actions, using the aql, denying the irada shar'iyya, whatever, and having a warped understanding of what is justice and injustice, right? You have to now be consistent in this new belief that you're coming up with. And to be consistent, these were the ideas that they had to basically sometimes explicitly say, or sometimes too scared to say, even though you know that this is what your belief implies, although they wouldn't actually say it, right? And so, as we were saying before, if this is what you believe, then to Allah, whether He punishes someone in the hellfire or rewards someone in paradise, it's all the same to Allah. No difference. There's no value placed to either thing. There's no wisdom and there's no justice involved, right? Because you've clearly denied that from Allah's actions. You have to, right? So I know this is a bit, it's a bit whatever, but this is really where these people are moving, where these people are going. And for that reason, you see that when you see these people, the Ash'aris and the Maturidis, trying to debate with the atheists, trying to debate with the philosophers and whatever else, those people just laugh at them. And, and this is, they laugh at these people. And they think that Islam is the Islam of the Ash'aris. Because historically, and the way that these Orientalists, when they study Islam, they see Islam as being, yes, the actual Islam is the Islam of the Mu'tazila and the Ash'aris. They are the rational people, right? The rational people. And the backward people are the people of the hadith and the sunnah and whatever else. So historically, to them, Islam is the Islam of the people of Kalam. So when they look at the people of Kalam, they look at their creed, and they look at their beliefs, and they look at their, the ideas, and what they are upon, and they see things like this, like denial of causality, right? Then they laugh at the Muslims, and they consider them to be stupid. Which who blames them for saying that type of thing when you deny the fact that an aspirin, for example, or is a molecule which has inherent qualities which leads to a certain effect. We believe Allah has put certain qualities in certain things that lead to certain effects, and they deny it. They say no, it's not the aspirin or whatever the molecule was that led to the removal of the pain. It was just something coincidental that Allah created at that point in time, and there is no such thing as causality and cause and effect in one. There's no such thing like this. You are denying. How will that make you look and appear in the to these people, and how will that make Islam look and appear to. So these are some of the implications of what we are discussing here. I think what we'll do is we'll stop at this point. We're still really discussing al-qasb. Inshallah, we'll elaborate upon that in more detail in the next lesson. But for now, if there's any questions on anything that's been said, I'm sure there are probably some questions. We'll try to address those questions or those issues, inshallah, so that we have a good understanding of where these people are really coming from. Al-Qasb just means to earn. Earning. Al-Qasb. It's like a trader. He goes and he trades, and so whatever he makes is his Qasb. It's his earning. That's Qasb. That's earning. Qasb, yeah. Al-Qasb. Yeah, Al-Qasb. Al-Qasb. Kaf, Sin, Ba. Al-Qasb. Causality is sabab is a cause. And a ta'leel And illah is like a cause. Illah. But the key thing is to understand how it starts with a man's actions, and then it leads on to other things. So the key thing is to make a connection between how these people get misguided. When they leave the book and the sunnah in one thing and they employ the aql, then they just go further and further and further and further astray. And whilst it might appear to them that everything they're saying is totally rational and whatever else, right? It's like Ibn Taymiyyah says that reason is always in conformity with revelation, right? Reason can never clash with revelation. And so when you try to employ your reason and you oppose the revelation, then you don't have reason. That's not reason. That's something else. That's jahl and whatever else. So these people try to employ reason, and they left all reason. As you can see, the conclusion of what they were led to. Yeah, that ayah is actually proof for what we're discussing. That ayah will actually come it comes later on in the lesson. That Allah is khaliqu kulli shay. Allah is the creator of every single thing. That actually comes later on. So that's right. That included within that is the actions of the servants. Why? Because Allah. This will be elaborated upon more detail. Allah is the creator of the qudra. The example that's given later on is, how does a plant grow? How does a plant grow? What does it require? It requires water and soil. But water and soil are created. So if water and soil, which are the asbab, the ways and means, the roots through which plants grow, if the means are created, then the effect has to be created as well. That follows, doesn't it? We can't say that the water and the soil created the plant, because they didn't. They were just means and mechanisms that led to the creation of the plant. Who created the water and the rain? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah is the creator of the plant in reality, right? Even though the water and the soil were asbab, there's causality. Definitely there's causality affirmed, that the water is a cause of plants, because Allah made it that way. Likewise, the soil is a cause of plants. Allah made it that way. But Allah is the creator. Allah is the creator of everything. And similarly in man, Allah did, when a person is born, did he create irada in himself? No. When a child is born, did he create qudra in himself? Did he bring about qudra in himself? No. It's all, Allah creates all of that. Right? So now when a man acts with irada and qudra that's been placed in him by someone external to himself, then is he the creator of his own actions? No. Allah is the creator of his actions. Because just like Allah is the creator of a plant because He created water and soil, likewise Allah is the creator, pay attention to the word, the khaliq, the creator of the actions of the servant. Right? But the man is the doer of his actions. Right? So we have the khaliq and we have the fa'il. Who is the khaliq? Allah is the creator of the actions. Who is the fa'il? Who is the doer of the actions? Man. When a man prays, who is praying? Is it Allah who's praying? No. Allah is not the fa'il of the deeds of His creation. Allah is the khaliq. Allah created that action of prayer. Why? Because He created the entity, that man, and He created the qudra, and He created the irada in that man. So whatever that man does is the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah is not the fa'il. Allah is not the fa'il of whatever His creation does. The creation are the fa'ilun. They are the ones who do whatever they do. So we distinguish between these two things. But this is elaborated upon a bit later on, inshallah ta'ala. So. So is that all clear? Sure? Any no's? Any ambiguities? Yeah. They see in this particular example of al-Jabr, many of them, these Ash'aris, they write themselves in the books. They have to admit that basically we are Jabariyyah. We haven't escaped. Forget all this gossip and whatever else. We haven't really truly escaped from the bid'ah of the Jabariyyah, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it look as if we're not saying that, we are saying that Allah is the doer of all actions and He forces everyone to do whatever, right? And then they try to escape from that and make it look as if man has a choice, and they invented al-Qasab. But the smart ones amongst them, they actually write in their books that basically we are Jabariyyah. We can't deny that we actually are Jabariyyah, because this Qasab, explanation doesn't really solve anything. That's why when they all try to deal with what do you mean by Qasab, when you look in all their books, you see just mass confusion. No one's able to explain what do you mean by Qasab. We don't get it. You're saying that Allah performs actions in a person and then gives him a credit for it. What's the difference between that then? Where does a person's will come in then? You still haven't affirmed a will. Just by calling it Qasab, you haven't done anything. You haven't, changed anything. Right? So then they're just wrangling around trying to make it look as if something it isn't, but they haven't really escaped from anything, if you know what I mean. So yes, some of them actually know, yes, they know that they haven't escaped from the bid'ah of Jabr, and that's what they're essentially upon. So they know that, yeah. And likewise, when they stick to the saying of denying causality, right, they're sticking to that, right, and they have to deny that because they have to maintain the other positions that they've held on to, right? So, it's. No, because there is a shubha involved, because there is like a ta'wil and shubha, and there's like complexity, and there's misunderstanding and false deduction of evidence and whatever else, and so because it's very complex, we know that they're not willfully on purpose, denying what is in the book and the Sunnah. It's upon ta'wil and shubha and misconception, and that's what they're upon. So we can't deny them to be kuffar on these types of issues. Yeah, once the hujjah has been established, because we deal with it on an individual basis, once an individual has come to clearly understand and the evidence has become clear to him, yes, I now understand that in the Quran Allah establishes that Allah does things for things, right? That Allah has created ways and means in the creation, and that's clearly established, and I affirm that now, whatever. Yeah? And so we're going to go through each and every single shubha, eliminate it all, and now it's crystal clear to him, and then he says, right, no, you know what, I'm not accepting any of that. Then obviously this is when the hujjah has been established. That's when the label of kufr can be applied. But these people, they themselves don't know what they're really involved in. They don't really understand the implications, most of them, of what they're really saying, and they hold on to it because of a shubha, and it's very complex and deep. And so we don't make takfir of these people. The same with the sifat, what they say on the attributes. They have ta'wil, they have shubha. So we don't declare them to be disbelievers, the Mu'tazila, for the denial of the attributes, until the hujjah has been established upon these people. Yeah. But the key thing here is that can you understand and appreciate now that when we have these types of people, like in Nuhamim Kellers, and people who are upon this Ash'ari and Maturidi way of thinking, when they go and debate with the atheists and they debate with the scientists and whatever else, that's a joke. How can you people be arguing when you deny causality, which Allah has clearly placed in His creation? Everything that we see is a proof of causality. Every single thing that we see around us is a proof of causality, right? That Allah has put inherent things within things, through which effects are brought about, right? So, but see now, the key thing is to make a connection between all these things, and how you move that much away from the book and the Sunnah, and you basically on the other side of the earth. That's really how it's actually working. That's exactly how it's working. You step one little bit away, and then you'll be over there in no time. And that's why the Salaf, they used to consider the smallest amount of misguidance to be very, very, very severe. And that's why we, likewise, when we are Salafis, when we speak of the Salafi manhaj and sticking to the Salafi manhaj when it comes to da'wah and mu'amala and al-wala wal-bara and so on and so forth, these are not insignificant small things. These are things from which many other things, follow on from if you don't hold tightly to these types of things. So when you study and you look at these issues from this angle and this point of view, you then begin to appreciating many other things, and then they all make sense. So why do our scholars emphasize certain things? Why do they speak about certain people? Why do they do all of that? You have an appreciation of what is taking place is taking place. Yeah, so they deny. So this is another thing we haven't even touched upon yet, because now there is another implication, right? See, we as Ahlul Sunnah, everything makes sense to us, right? There's no contradiction between Qadar and Shar. Shar is legislation. Why? Because Allah has made Iman and righteousness and prayer and truthfulness and everything else to be a means by which He enters His servants into paradise, right? So now to us, there's no conflict. Why? Because Allah has created asbab in the creation. There are asbab that relate to His creation, and there are asbab that relate to His Sharia, right? So there are asbab Shar'iyah, right? There is, for example, Salatul Janaza is a sabab of shafa'a being accepted for an individual who's died. That individual then might be forgiven, right? Now we see asbab as it relates to the Sharia, right? Dua is a sabab for what? For bringing about khair and whatever else. So in the Sharia there are clearly asbab. And those asbab, a person, even though it's from Allah's mercy that he enters paradise, but his actions do have a role. His actions have a role, right? So to Ahlul Sunnah, when we believe in all these things in the right way, there is no conflict between, a man having will and choice and Allah being the creator of the actions, and between Allah ordering and prohibiting, right? And between the what Allah decrees and brings about. In everything, there is no conflict. Everything is like a unified, consistent whole where everything fits together, right? With these people now, when you move away from that balanced position, now you're going to everything starts messing up. So now conflict starts to appear now. So with the Jabariyyah, these Jabariyyah, they basically began to deny the Sharia. Right? So they said because Allah, this is what you find with many of the Sufis, that Allah is basically forcing everyone to do what they are doing. Right? Therefore, the notion of the Sharia as it relates to Al-Qadar, we see nothing but conflict. There's got to be conflict. How can Allah order and then force you to do otherwise? Right? How can Allah, force you and then how can Allah order you and force you to do otherwise? This is what the position of Iblis was. Remember? Iblis, what was the issue with Iblis? The whole concept of what Iblis is saying is, you commanded me, then you forced me to do something else. That's why he said, Bima aghwaytani. Look at the arrogance. He said, because you have misguided me. Right? Right? So here, this is an issue of Aqidah that we learned from this statement of Iblis, which is that he sees a conflict between Ash-Shara', legislation, Allah commanding, prohibiting, and Allah's Qadar. There's a conflict. Now, how can you command and then force me to do something else? Right? This is what the Jabariyyah, like some of these Jabariyyah, that's what they're upon. Right? They denied Ash-Shara', meaning they denied the idea of legislation, full stop. Right? That legislation doesn't apply, doesn't exist, it's meaningless, because Allah forces everyone to do what they do anyway. So how does the idea of Allah's legislation fit in with the scheme of things? It doesn't. Right? So they denied legislation. So therefore, we're not bound to abide by the Sharia. So everything now is lawful. And that's why some of these people, some of these extremist Sufis who are Jabariyyah, to them there was no halal or haram. Right? So everything is halal. So therefore they would do whatever they would do with family members, whatever else, incest, everything, whatever, because there is no halal or haram, there is no sharia. Everything is jabar. Everything is jabar. Right? Huh? Well, some of these people, what they were in terms of the madhab, they were varied, but they're the ones who inherited the wahdatul wujud along with jabar, right? And all this came together, and you see now the denial of ash-shar', right? See where all its origins come from. You see where its origins is. It's iblisi, it's satanic. It's from Iblis, because he said bima aghwaytani, because you have misguided me, right? So he put the blame on Allah's actions, right? So he saw a conflict between Allah's command, which is the shar', legislation, and the qadar, what Allah actually brings and determines and decrees and brings about conflict. Whereas we say there is no conflict between ash-shar' and al-qadar. Allah, all of it is congruent, and why? Because there is hikmah behind what Allah does, right? So, but these people, this is what they went astray in, right? We said at the beginning, hikmah wa ta'leel, the idea of adl and justice and injustice, whatever else. They erred in those steps, and it led them to all this evil, right? So, I forgot what your question was now. Sharia, yeah. So they deny, yes. So clearly there are some people who deny the Sharia, and that's what these Sufis are upon. A lot of these Sufis, like you'll see, like this Nazim and Qabrusi, and a lot of these people, what they present outwardly is something is not what they really believe inwardly. These people, they actually believe that all religions are one and the same, wahdatul adyan. Why? Because think of it, Allah is forcing every Christian to commit a shirk. Allah is forcing every atheist. Allah forced Fir'aun upon his whatever else, right? So the only doer is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? There's everything else is irrelevant. And so therefore what we do in the life of this world is meaningless. There is no halal, there is no haram. It's all Allah acting and doing. And this is the Tawheed. This is the Tawheed of the Jabariyyah, right? So these people, what they conceal from you, these people won't see any difference between Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Shirk, Kufr. Everyone is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because Allah is the one who is the doer in reality. That's what they actually really truly believe, and they don't abide by the Sharia. The Sharia is, and so look at the evil that these people are led to, through the route of al-qadar and also through the route of denial of attributes, because these things like merged over time, and so there are people who deny the principle of legislation as a result of their deviation in al-qadar. That legislation is meaningless, and it's just it doesn't make sense. How can we reconcile between Allah commanding and prohibiting, yet He forces people to do what they do? It doesn't make sense. But see, to some of these people, even though that is the implication of what they're upon, they can't actually see it, right? A lot of them. So the Ash'aris, for example, won't deny the legislation. Obviously they worship, and they, of course they do, but it's just that they haven't really truly fathomed and understood that this really is the implication of what they are really upon. But because it's such a complex thing, they haven't got that far with their reason and ability to grasp that implication, or they're too scared to go in that direction to grasp that implication, right? To admit that yes, we are upon centuries and centuries and centuries of misguidance, but we're just too arrogant to admit it, because now it's become a school of thought and whatever else, and we don't want to let go of what we're upon, Any other questions? So I thought all that crystal clear? No? Some nods of heads there.
So what was the meaning of the Jabariyyah after the sending of the prophets and messengers then?
Yeah, again, that doesn't really have any implication. The institution of prophethood, the institution of revelation, it doesn't, there's, you can't reconcile that between that and between Allah forcing and doing everything. You can't reconcile between those two things. And so that's why a lot of these people, when you look at these people, the Sufis who are upon Jabr and whatever else, you will clearly see that basically this whole Sharia and whatever else is just something for the common people. It's, there's ways and routes of arriving at knowledge which is better and higher than revelation. Because revelation, you are relying upon an intermediary, right? And revelation is just for the common people. It's just, something outward and apparent that people stick to give them some meaning in their lives and to live moral lives according to them, right? And it's, but as for us, meaning them, we take knowledge directly from the Creator. We merge and become one with the Creator, right? So that's what they mean, that when they perform all the dhikr and everything else, they're trying to annihilate themselves, right? So to become one with so at the same time, you've got to remember what understanding of Tawheed they have in their minds. They have multiple types of Tawheeds. One type of Tawheed that says nothing exists in the creation nothing exists in the universe except Allah. Everything is Allah, right? There's one type of Tawheed. Second type of Tawheed is no one is acting except Allah alone. There's another type of Tawheed, right? So, what they're trying to do is they're trying to say that we are just going to, by way of dhikr and spirituality, we will just perish from our existence and become one with Allah, right? So therefore when they become one with Allah, then all this idea of right and wrong and halal and haram and whatever else, it doesn't exist anymore, because you've now become one with Allah. It's really twisted and mad, and it's mind boggles as to how al-fana, they call it al-fana, yeah, to perish and to become annihilated, to become one with Allah. And as a result of which you ascend the level of every single prophet and you become one with Allah. And so therefore all the sharias are just the sharias are just meaningless things. They don't actually mean anything. You're far above and beyond that now. That's just for the riffraff and the rabble at the bottom who haven't come to that enlightenment that you have come to, right? But why do these people arrive at this situation? It's because of obviously these initial doctrines, when they started off, denial of Allah's attributes, denial of al-Qadar, or exaggerating in al-Qadar, whatever else. These started in the first century, and then it was just a matter of centuries when they were forced to stick to the implications of those beliefs that led them in those directions, that eventually led them into this type of, kufr and shirk that they're upon. These people are present today. They're upon. That's what they're upon. There's people present today who are upon this, and so underlying all that is, as I said, these deviations in the aqidah. Okay, inshallah, we'll close the lesson there. Test you on it next week, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.